Welcome to the Navigating Disruption podcast. I'm your host, Shaquille Barmel. I'm the CEO of Ocean Blue Strategic and partner with the Summit Group. I'm a coach, consultant, and speaker, and I help leaders, entrepreneurs, and sales professionals make an impact through improved performance. In this podcast, I share insights and interviews with interesting leaders to define practical lessons that you can use to make an impact in the face of uncertainty. We are proud to be supported by the Summit Group, helping companies to increase revenue, deepen customer relationships by moving from sales excellence to business relevance through transformative and engaging learning experiences. Back in the 90s, I remember coming into the lunchroom to get my coffee, and there was Sam flipping through the province newspaper sports section. He had such a calm and curious demeanor, so we would usually find ourselves in a conversation about something that made me think. Sam Sidhu is now Director of HR with McCarthy Tètrault, one of the largest law firms in Canada. But I learned in this conversation that he started his career in the late 80s by stumbling into a conversation. 15 years later, he fell upon his true calling when he wasn't even looking. We chat about his pivots, his experience working in an industry in the midst of disruption, and his perspectives on leadership. Enjoy the conversation. Hi, Sam. How are you?
I'm well, still. How are you?
Really great. I trust you're well into hard work and a new role in the new year.
I am. You know what? I'm looking forward to a very good year.
Yeah. No, it's no matter what it is, it will be better than the previous year. Just because I guess we've built some resilience over the last year that hopefully will carry us through 2021. Yeah. And there's a vaccine here. So that should.
Yeah. You know, it's also nice that even in a year like 2020, lots of good things happen to me and lots of good things happen to lots of people I know. So even in these years like this, lots of good things still happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's dive into some of that and some of the good things that have happened to you. Sam, just so that everybody knows, we're going to go back and forth in time, but through our conversation, I'd love to learn a bit about your career experiences, your lessons learned, and what, things you've learned that actually might be helpful to both young people and leaders in this next few years ahead of us. How does that sound?
It sounds good. It sounds great. Thank you.
Okay, so Sam, why don't you tell us a little bit of what you're doing now? What's your current role? What your current organization is right now?
Yeah, well, it's actually interesting. I'm doing a permanent full-time role at McCarthy Tètrault. It's actually McCarthy MT Services Partnership. McCarthy Tètrault is one of the leading national law firms in Canada. And I went into a new role basically end of November of this last year as the HR director here for BC, which means I provide HR leadership for our Vancouver office. And I'm also the HR business partner to two national services groups. One is clients and markets. The other is IT. And another really cool part of this is the way the model at McCarthy is set up. Our regional HR leaders also play a lead as leading at what we call our center of expertise or COE. And so someone is leading compensation, another one is on reporting systems, another one leads talent acquisition. And I'm really pleased that mine is performance management and learning. So that was, very cool and was a big part of my decision. Well, big part of what attracted me to the role in the first part, and a really big part of my decision to come aboard was the nice blend of that generalist HR role with senior leadership, and then also having accountability for that learning piece, which I've always loved and my career has kind of evolved into over time.
Yeah, I mean, your career wasn't always in HR or performance management and learning specifically, but it has definitely grown into that career. I've looked at a bit of your profile, and I see that's very much evolved. Well, that's great. Yeah. We're going to come back. We're going to come back to your current role and what you are excited about. Let's step back in time a little bit, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Can you, when you were growing up, you grew up in BC?
I did. I'm, more or less a Lower Mainland born and bred guy. Yeah, absolutely.
So when you were growing up in BC and let's say you were in high school, what were your first thoughts of what you wanted to do for a living or career, or
Oh,
did you even have any thoughts at that time?
no, it was all survival back then, Shaquille. It was like, you know what I mean? I was like, well, okay, it was a fear of graduating because graduating meant you had to figure out what you were going to do next.
Yeah.
And in my family, we did not have a lot of people. I come from a very blue collar family, sawmill workers, salt of the earth type of people,
Yeah.
but not of a lot of advanced education. So no, I had no idea. I just defaulted into university because that was a safe place to go while you maybe hopefully tried to figure it out, but no plan. And you actually know at the time, it was funny. I thought maybe teaching, because I respected teachers and things like that. But I was a big introvert too at the time. So I didn't know how that would even align, having to be in front of a classroom when I'm an introvert. But I thought of teaching, but at the time our economy was at a tough place and teaching jobs were tough.
Yeah.
It wasn't considered a good profession to go into. So I went into, business because everybody said, well, go into business education. Yeah. But no plan. No plan.
Yeah. I think it was a very different time for us. I mean, you're probably a couple of years older than me because, I say that only because you were already working when I started working at Mohawk, where we worked together.
Right.
But at that time, I mean, to be honest, it wasn't that complicated to think about what career. I mean, there weren't so many options, right? I mean, you really only had to think about whether you were going to go to university or not first, right?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. It was university or trades.
Yeah.
As what it was. And trades would be because if you knew somebody in trades, then you might have a connection and default into that. And then a university, because university then was different. I think it was, you didn't really need to know what you were going to go into when you went. Most people, you applied to a general arts program.
Yeah.
When you first went in, you could take your undergraduate years to kind of figure it out and then potentially transfer into a different program. So university is a place you kind of went while you figured it out. Yeah. And hopefully you would figure it out in university, which again didn't happen for me. So that didn't work. That didn't actually work for me. But yes, I think it was a different time. I think also there was less pressure, Shaquille.
Yeah.
No, but I think there was also less pressure to be somebody back then. Yeah. I think that back then it was about, getting a good job that would pay for a good standard of living. A job, back then people still talked about being in a job potentially for life. Yeah. Even because we're talking about, I graduated, in high school back in 79. And so back then it was about getting a job for life like your mother or father might have. Or
yeah, it's true.
Right? Well, so it was a different mentality back then. Today, it's such a different expectation, I think, for young people. It's really about being their best self. They talk about things like, what's going to make me happy? Because we didn't talk about what would make us happy. We just talked about, can I get a paycheck?
Yeah, it's true, isn't it? Can I get a paycheck and can I make sure at least I don't hate what I'm doing?
That's it.
Can I get some enjoyment out of my work? There was a little bit of, can I fulfill my potential? But it was still very superficial, right? It was really just, if I studied marketing, can I go get a job where I get to apply what I learned? Or if I studied, accounting, can I become an accountant or that kind of thing, right?
Right. And that would be great. I mean, that would be like the ideal.
Yeah.
Oh, but I think today it's, I think our students today are like, that's what I'm working towards. I'm working towards applying what I want to do, what I know how to do, interested in doing. Yeah. Which I think is wonderful to me, by the way. I think it's wonderful that that's the mindset, to do what you want to love, to have those elements in your job, because you spend a lot of time at work. Most of us still spend a lot of time at work, either physically or mentally. We're at work a fair amount of our day. So to be able to love it, or at least to be interested in it, I mean.
The other thing back in our time is there weren't really these stories of young entrepreneurs, tech startups, people that started businesses in their garage. I mean, basically, we had Steve Jobs and Bill Gates. Right. They were our examples. And in fact, they were still very young at at that time. But it seems like there's so many more examples and role models and people that, have made it very big, very young. I wonder if that's adding to this pressure that young people might feel to do something big, to make a name for themselves. What do you think?
You know, it's funny you say that because I've got kids myself. They're young adults now.
Yeah.
And we've talked about that, but I think it does influence them because they can pick up their cell, which they all have next to them almost seems 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
And they can, whether it's on Instagram or whatever other thing they use to follow people, they'll see so many examples of people making it big that are as their age or younger, who've had an idea, who particularly may not even have a talent.
Yeah.
And are somehow making it big. And there's an expectation that, why am I not making it big?
Yeah.
I'm as smart as or smarter than these people. So I think it's an expectation, an unhealthy expectation, if you ask me.
Yeah.
That is out there, that people somehow feel that unless they are equal to or doing what these others are doing, that somehow they're not living to their fullest.
Right.
Which I think is unhealthy because I think, there's exceptions are exceptions for a reason, because if we were all an exception, there'd be no such thing as an exception,
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you're pointing out some challenges of being young today, and I definitely see it. When we were younger, I'm sure we thought there were challenges too. There are some positive things that are available to young people now that they weren't before. But before we dive into that, I want to come back to that. So let's put a pin there because I do really want to come back to some of the positive things that are available to young people today. But you didn't know what you wanted to study.
Mm-hmm.
You were hoping it would kind of expose itself when you were in university. And so you came out of university with a business degree?
I came out of university with 2 degrees. I came out with a business administration degree. I went to Simon Fraser University here.
Yeah.
A business administration degree. And then I came out with a Bachelor of Arts in Economics. And the Bachelor of Arts in Economics is my first degree. But just to show you how little I knew of what I wanted, I declared for economics and I pursued economics, so I was getting good grades in it.
Yeah.
So I thought, if I'm getting good grades, this should be the way I go. Because you could go 2 ways in. You could go with the general business courses you took in your undergrad. You could go towards like business, or you could go towards economics. And I was doing, with the exception of one course, I was doing better in economics. So I thought, that'll be my major. I'll do it in economics.
Yeah.
And then in my end of my 3rd year, beginning of my 4th year, I thought, oh my God, I hate this. Like, I'm not enjoying economics. I'm actually worried about, then I started to do a little bit of career profiling. It's like, oh my God, what would my career look like?
Yeah.
And I thought, man, I think pretty dry, and I thought, okay, so I'm going to go see a faculty advisor. And, I got some great advice. Said, you know what, you're in a very fortunate position. A lot of your courses in the undergrad go both ways. You can go into business administration, which is broader.
Yeah.
Marketing, finance, accounting. It's a lot broader. So I did 2 more years and got a degree in business administration.
Yeah.
And so I appreciated that more in the workings of business, but I still didn't know what I wanted to do or how to go about it.
Mm-hmm.
But I graduated with those 2 degrees. And then I did what everybody else did back then. I mean, there was no internet really.
Yeah.
You looked at ads. Companies still put out ads for positions.
In the newspaper, paper newspapers.
Yeah, paper more or less. And there was a office on campus that, you saw postings and you could go through them and you got advice. So I kind of worked there. I got a couple of entry-level positions that you would see. And they were typically in sales back then, Shaquille, into business.
Yeah.
As some type of sales rep or account rep. And I applied for a few and interviewed terribly, I know. Terribly, and didn't get called back. And about the same time, I got married.
Oh,
so about the same time I got married, and I had this tremendous pressure to okay, not only have I graduated, I just got married. So it was a time of great stress for me, actually, without a plan. Yeah, without a plan, and it just circumstance. Was my wife had a relative worked for Mohawk Oil.
Oh, so that's the story of how you got your job at Mohawk.
Yeah, and you know how it is. One of the things that happens is, this is one of the things I'm a firm believer in. It's tell people what's going on in your world.
Yeah.
So if we had talked about me having graduated We had not talked about, some of the challenges I was having in job searching or what I even wanted to do potentially. I don't know if this person would have shown any interest, because how would they have known?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So by sharing this and making it public, this kind of came to me. And this relative said, well, it's funny because where I work, we're trying to get more university graduate and educated people interested in our company. And at this time, convenience gasoline retailing as a profession.
Right.
So is that something Sam might be interested in?
Huh.
So that started the conversation with Mohawk.
Oh, that's interesting. So, that was back in the day when this idea of seeking mentors and seeking advice from people about your career really didn't exist, right? I mean, we talk a lot about mentors and all that now, but back then it was your career counselor, your faculty advisor, your parents. And if you had immigrant parents like I did, probably like you did, I'm guessing, they didn't know what to tell you, right? So you were lucky enough to figure out early to share what you were going through with somebody else that might be able to shed some light on what you were going through. Yeah.
And I think that an insight for me there, I think that's for people today is, and when you share it positively.
Right.
I think that, the story I told about where I wasn't the story about like, woe is me. It was more a story. Here's who I am. Here's where I am with my challenge. At the same time, I'm really excited about moving forward, and we'll love to do that. I just, like a lot of people, really don't know how to do that right now.
Right.
But, I'm a firm believer wherever I go, they're going to get a guy who really wants to do well, who's got a great work ethic. So I kind of, for lack of a term, pitched myself around my attributes than around any skills that I might have, because I didn't really have any skills per se. I had attributes. So I pitched my attributes, and that's what this person connected with.
Okay, you pitched your attributes. So where do you think that, I mean, I won't call it wisdom because you were too young to be wise, but where do you think that insight of pitching, of knowing that, to pitch attributes, to be positive, where do you think that came from?
I think some of it is just, it's role models. I mean, my wife has been my supporter of mine. We've been married now almost 35 years.
Wow, amazing.
She's been in my corner every day, and she's believed in me. So when I would share my struggles openly with her, she would say, but yeah, you've got all this that goes for you. I know you as this person. You need to talk about that person.
Yeah.
And not what you don't have. Talk about what you do have, because that's marketable, Sam. Like, that's, companies will want people who are genuine, who have good work ethic, who want to learn. That's what they're looking for. You're smart enough to learn the job or whatever job you'll take, but they won't know that unless you talk about who you really are. So I thought that was great advice. I saw, my dad's a blue collar guy and was a blue collar guy. And, I just watched him, and he was just a role model of showing up for work, he used to say to me, he goes, you earn your paycheck. You have an employment contract, which was like, he didn't use that language, but he would just basically say, you have to earn what you're paid. So you have a commitment to your work. And so that's what I talked about.
Yeah. I think we were really lucky to have those kinds of role models when we were young. It's people that, put in a day's work and got paid, whether my dad was a business person, your dad was a blue collar laborer, you could see the return for actual physical effort put in, right? And there's something about that sets a great example.
Oh yeah. My dad used to say to me, he goes like, no one ever came and grabbed me off my sofa and made me go into this place and apply for a job.
Right.
And made me work. I came in wanting to work here.
Yeah.
So if I come in wanting to work here, I need to show up with a commitment to do the work. So that's just stayed with me forever.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And you married well, my friend. I mean, she sounds like she was very wise way back then, and probably would have been early 20s, right?
Yeah. No, absolutely. I married. Well, it's like anything, right? Like the people that support you, if you've got somebody who believes in you, because there's very little in life you can do alone.
Yeah.
I believe, Shaquille. I mean, I think it's, you said you mentioned mentorships or role models. Yeah. My wife is tremendous support for me. But I've been very fortunate. I've got a great network of people, friends, family who are believers. And supportive, and you just have to cultivate that over time. But you have to show up, then you have to do it. You can't people will. I don't, for example, HR people are always asking for references for me or referrals, and I've told them before, I have to, that's my reputation, that's my brand.
Yeah.
So you have to live up to it.
Absolutely. Personal brand. Absolutely. You have to.
Yeah,
I mean, it's like that. Yeah, absolutely. So now I'm going to fast forward. Because you and I met in, I wouldn't guess, the lunchroom of Mohawk Oil's headquarters in Burnaby, British Columbia, years later, probably, mid-early 90s, when I took a job at head office. But prior to that, you ended up managing a Mohawk gas station, right? I remember you from Airport Mohawk, I think.
Yeah. I managed 3. I started in late 86, early 87. Yeah. I started, and that was when they were doing what they're called the district manager training program. And there's a couple of us that were going to come straight out of university and go into assistant manager jobs. Okay. And was within a couple of years become district managers. And I actually did it for 6 years. I managed 3 service stations. I never did apply for an internal position while I was in those 6 years. I found that I liked managing people. I found I liked the customer, the being related to something that you could see the immediate connection to a customer. Yeah. Like there was somebody you could see the outcome of your efforts like almost immediately. Yeah. I liked business acumen. I enjoyed the responsibility, accountability for profit loss. I don't know. And I think a part of it might be I got comfortable doing it. Mm-hmm. So I didn't really look for change. And I think that's one thing I've heard now is if I might go back and do that differently. Yeah. Is that, when you get comfortable, there's such thing as too much comfort because then you don't grow. Yeah. And so I think I had gotten comfortable. It was, we had a bonus program. You could, when I got to the larger stations, I got made a little bit more money and so, my wife was working, we were doing okay. So I wasn't really ambitious per se. Yeah. And I got comfortable. But if I were to go back, I think I might look at that differently and go, well, what is it I really want? I wasn't thinking forward. I was in the moment. Yeah. So, but in the moment, it served me well. It gave me a great foundation. But that's where I started, was at the station, that I learned so much about people and human nature and performance management and really about people. Yeah. I learned so Yeah, it's kind of like when you work at a service station. It's like you're the neighborhood bartender, right? You see the best and worst of people, both employees of all ages and customers of all ages at different stages and walks of life. If you're a keen observer of people, you can learn a lot. Yeah, I think there's a great fundamental in having to do work where you actually are accountable for something beyond yourself. Like, I mean, I couldn't just do my own work and go home. I was accountable for this business. These are $1 million businesses. Yeah. I was accountable for, work teams up to 20 to 25 people. And then, it forces you to have a higher level of self-accountability. Yeah. So that I think that was great grounding in that. Well, it's just to put it in context, that one of the locations that you managed, Airport Mohawk, that was, I think, one of the, if not the busiest and highest volume service stations in the Lower Mainland, right? Yeah, at the time it was. It was very much most of the other stations were very, they weren't as commercial oriented. Yeah. It was a lot of just drive-by regular automotive traffic and neighborhood kind of convenience stores. Whereas the airport had a very commercial, we had accounts for propane and diesel fuel, and these trucker units would come in. So we had a higher volume. So it was a learning for me from going from a kind of a neighborhood store to that in itself. Yeah. And, and I succeeded 2 very successful managers when I went into the role itself. So, you go into these things that you learn about expectations. And so it was a really good, on the job experience and stuff that I still take from today. In the role I do today, I take on those job experiences. Yeah. It's so interesting because if you were to talk to anybody and say,
working in a service station, working in a gas station, working in customer service, running a gas station does not seem like this high profile, prestigious job. But I experienced it. It sounds like you experienced as well. I'm grateful for that time where I was more focused on learning and exchanging ideas with people and experiencing, what happens when I try this experiment and managing a person versus this experiment. You actually get to learn so much in that environment.
I think also the other part is, not to let people define you. Like that was my thing too. So when I graduated university with 2 degrees, and here I was wearing a uniform and running a gas station. There were people I know for sure who would say like, "Oh, he sure has underachieved."
Yeah.
And I would say, "Oh, right, because you graduated and you're a marketing coordinator.
Yeah.
So you're doing a white collar job. I'd like to see you try to run this multi-million-dollar business."
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And manage one person, let them manage 25. And I think the education, a paid education I got in that role was invaluable. But it goes back to, I think it really taught me not to define myself by the optics of things, but also not to judge others by the optics of things.
Yeah, that's a really good lesson to learn early on, right?
Yeah.
I remember one night going out for dinner with some friends after I did a shift at the gas station in the summer. And I guess I must have changed somebody's oil or did something under the hood before I went out. I quickly went home, showered, changed, but I still had like grease under my fingernails. It was kind of a permanent thing.
Yeah.
And I remember at dinner that night, one of my good friends called it out and started making fun of me for having grease under my fingernails. It stuck with me, but I also remember it was a point of pride that like I was working with my hands, right? But I still remember that incident very well. And I think that's what you're speaking of. I learned not to define myself by my friend's view of what I was doing. Yeah,
Pretty absolutely. Cool.
So now you spent some time in retail operations and you came to head office. You were always involved in some form of retail operations, retail marketing. I've talked in other episodes of how Mohawk was acquired by Husky. When you left Mohawk, what did you do?
Well, when I left, I was in a regional marketing manager position.
Yeah,
which I had done for about 2 years at that time. And what Husky's process was, they were kind of evaluating people, deciding if they would offer jobs or not to people, or whether you would stay into transition. So they offered me a position as an advertising and promotions manager in their Calgary office, and which I declined. First of all, I knew I didn't want to move to Calgary for reasons. I've always wanted to remain the Lower Mainland, and that was easy. But the other part was I knew that I didn't want to remain in marketing. So that's what I think is important too. When you try different things. You don't know if it's going to work until you try it. But I did it and I enjoyed it, but I knew it wasn't where I wanted to go back. What I missed was the connection of like the P&L and just the people part wasn't as big a part of that role.
Yeah, true.
Was when I was in retail as a district manager, even, which was the position I went into before I went into marketing.
Yeah.
So when I left, I you figure out, what am I going to do now? It's that thing, right? You have a moment. And what I thought to myself was, I have to really, the world might know me now as a marketer for the last 2 years, but what is it I want for myself? I had to think a little bit more about what I wanted for myself. And I did the exercise, I took a line of paper, I wrote a line down the middle on the left side, the things I've done and what my skills are, and on the right side, what do I want in my next job? And I did that exercise, and it wasn't marketing. It was people-related business acumen, profit loss management, entertaining, interesting industry or product, probably consumer product versus manufacturing type of thing. So I put all those things down, and I went out. Back then, people use search agencies a lot.
Yeah.
So you send your resume out to search agencies, and I did, and when you put the resume, you have to go out and tell them what you want. I said I want to go back into being just area manager, district manager type of role, not marketing. So I went out into the market as that, and I've got a district manager, area manager job at Rogers Video.
Rogers Video. Oh my gosh, what a blast from the past.
Yeah, that would have been in 1998. I would have joined Rogers as an area manager in their stores. I had a retail territory after. Yeah.
So this was probably pre-Blockbuster and definitely pre-Netflix, yes?
No, Blockbuster was our biggest competitor.
Okay, so Blockbuster was around. Okay.
Yeah, huge. They were the biggest competitor, and the neighborhood mom and pops were big back then.
Okay.
And we were the largest Canadian-owned video retail chain.
Okay.
And Netflix was not even an idea at the time.
Right.
back then, what was coming was, and when they did start, they started with mail to your home DVD rentals.
Yeah, right.
That was their model.
Yeah. So talk about, talk about disruption. I mean, that's obviously one of the industries that people write about as in their illustration of disruption. What was it like working in that business? Because you basically worked in that business until it wound down. Tell me, what was it like in the organization seeing the end coming?
Well, you know what? It's so funny you say that. I think people will be of two different minds. I think that there was a fair number of people who saw the end coming.
Yeah.
And then there were some who just denied it.
Right.
Because they didn't want to acknowledge that it was coming. So we kept, and that was part of our, I think that if you look back in hindsight, I don't think people will disagree, is that we didn't evolve our business model.
Right.
And we kind of stuck to our pretty much traditional bricks and mortar retail model, video, home entertainment based retail rental, retail and sales, because we sold movies as well. Model. And at near the very end, last couple of years, we tried to diversify, and we went like, okay, so what? Yeah, so we asked ourselves, like, what is our core competency? You know, and I think some people, and I think there was not agreement on what it was. Is it? And I think some people thought, well, our core competency is retailing, traditional bricks and mortar retailing. So whatever we do is going to have to go through our stores.
Right.
And it's going to be a consumer comes in the front door and partakes of our services and our products. That's what we do best. It's what we know. It's how we manage our distributions for that. We manage our logistics for that.
Yeah.
At the same time, there was the opportunity probably to look at it and go, well, what is the actually that we do? We're the business of providing entertainment to consumers. Period. Right? If we could have stopped there and said period, then we could have asked ourselves, if we say period, it opens up the whole world of how can we do that?
Right.
Traditionally, we've done bricks and mortar, but it doesn't mean that we are bound to do it bricks and mortar.
Yeah.
So I think that's the whole piece about it. I think if I look at businesses that are successful, it's that whole part about reinventing, right, Shaquille? You know, I can't remember, I can't remember the name of the company that it started with horse-drawn carriages and moved into a whole different, and it's conceived the automobile coming and killing its business, and it just evolved.
Yeah.
It moved into a whole different way of doing a whole different product line, service, business. It's that same idea. But Blockbuster couldn't do it. We didn't do it. Anybody else in that business didn't do it. And then Netflix, I think, also would not have survived.
Yeah.
You know, with the DVD rental, you know, put it in a box, return it to you in your mailbox, you pick it up, return it when you're done with it. Because, you know, what killed all that was streaming, video.
Right.
But Netflix saw that.
Yeah.
Right? Saw the potential in that and jumped in.
Yeah.
Whereas we saw it as a threat, not an opportunity.
Yeah, it's so interesting you say that, because it just really does demonstrate it's about how you look at things does change everything, right? So what's the difference? The difference was the leadership at Rogers Video or Blockbuster and the leadership at Netflix and how they perceived the changes in consumer behavior and taking action around it. It was a mindset and a perspective, not, oh, look what's happening to us perspective. It is things are changing. How do you look at the things that are changing? Right.
And I think that you hit the last part. I think that we looked at it as look what's happening to us. And then in the very end, all we were doing was squeezing the last dollar out. The added complication, of course, is that we were a part of a much larger organization of communications.
Right.
that was that time, evolving its business strategy too, which was primarily heavily cable oriented, and wireless was now becoming king.
Yeah.
And it was the whole bringing into the wireless business, which was not our core skill set and knowledge of.
Yeah.
But which, if you look at Rogers now, retail stores are wireless stores. And if you're in Ontario, they're a combination of wireless and cable. So they evolved.
They evolved. Yeah.
Our parent company, but not through our leadership at that time.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's, obviously the theme of this is talking about navigating disruption. So that's a huge lesson for people going through this particular time, is to not take your eye off the changes and shifts in the way your customers are behaving, the way they're living, the way they're changing. You can either view the pandemic as something that's happening to your business, or you can look and say, how are our customers' lives changing because of it? And what can we do to serve their needs better than they're being served right now?
Right. And I think that it's funny you say that, because there's a lot more being written about transformation and disruption than ever before. So, if I think back to when at that time, who were the thought leaders of the time, they were just starting to make inroads into that area about that. We were still talking about Jim Collins' Good to Great.
Yeah, right.
And defining your core competencies and your hedgehog concept. It was just starting to come up. It was just starting to become, because at the time it was the old Tom Peters in Search of Excellence. It was really refining what you already did.
Yeah.
But then it evolved into not refining what you already did, but what's on the horizon. So it was, I think, also an evolution in thinking in business that was starting.
Absolutely.
At that time too.
Absolutely.
Right? Because again, tech startups were just, as you said, just starting.
Yeah.
Right? Really.
Yeah. The whole availability of broadband internet connections really did start the changes. Either you saw the implications of what that was going to be 10, 15 years down the road, or you didn't. And if you saw it, you could make some early moves and pivots. And I think there's a lesson there for people going through this change right now. Well, this is a great place for me to make a shift in direction, but also against this backdrop of this type of disruption. You landed and you pivoted quite significantly from retail operations into HR. How did that happen?
Yeah, it's weird. It was actually really weird. It's my now 20-year accidental career, I tell people.
Yeah.
So now it's a career of choice. But how it happened, and this is a great story for development and the value of performance conversation. So, as most companies do of any size, they typically have a performance review process where once a year you sit down and you talk to your manager about your performance on the year, and then also sometimes you talk about the development and your potential and where you'd like to go with your career. And of course, we could get into a whole hours about how it should be ongoing, not just once a year. But anyway, once a year. And we had done this at Rogers Video in my second year of this. My director of operations at the time, Linda Smith was her name, said to me during the conversation, she goes, Sam, you're doing really well and this is really good. I'd like to talk to you about your future development and what you see. And I said, well, I know it's not marketing. I've done that. I know it's not merchandising as well. I think it's still really in this area of management connected to the business and working with people to directly, affect outcomes. I think that's the piece for me, Linda. That's where I know it is. And she said, okay, well, what about HR? And I said, well, that's out of left field. And no, I hadn't had a lot of interaction with HR. And at the time, if I did, I didn't find them high value at the time, Shaquille, because I didn't think they could relate to and what I actually did, to the challenges I faced as a business leader. They would always talk to me more in terms of policies I found and stuff. And she goes, well, that's exactly why they approached us about trying to bring somebody into the business for a year. It's a contract. It's a backfill for somebody on maternity. But the HR team here really wants somebody with some business acumen to help inform our HR team on business. But at the same time, we thought of you because you seem to be known for really being engaged on the people side of getting results versus just looking at the spreadsheet.
Interesting.
So we think that's the right profile of somebody for us And what's funny? I'm not a risk taker. And I came home and I talked to my wife about it, and she thought, "Wow, you love the people part. Like, what a great opportunity to learn." And they were providing me with that. And it's a year contract. If it doesn't work, you don't love it. We'll backfill you internally on a contract. You can go back, and it worked. I found I really enjoyed it, and my career evolved. I went into what was a backfill manager recruitment position, but within 6 months, we'd hired a director of training development from Earls. This guy came in, and he was influential with me and just informing my way of thinking about people and the contribution they make, and talent eyes and talent assessment. And so we moved into talent development, and my career started to evolve from then, and by choice.
Wow. Well, I mean, just speaks to, there's been a lot of debate over the years, and I'm sure you've been in the middle of it, around the value of performance management, performance reviews, and all of that. Yeah. But what a really great story and example of when it's done well with the leader that really does invest in the best thing for the individual and the company, that there's a huge power to influence careers.
Yeah. Well, it goes back to, if you look at companies, I mean, it was really interesting, because the traditional thing would have been to firing somebody with an HR background to do the backfill. But they took the time at that time and said, well, listen, hang on. This is an opportunity for us. So this is just the whole idea of, like, when something happens, do you do what you've always done?
Yeah.
Or do you take at least a moment to ask yourself, what is the possibility in this now? And I think my influence on this whole thing now is influenced by the coaching training I took many years ago.
Yeah.
It's made me much more curious. And one of the things coaching always teaches us is, when something happens, ask yourself a question. So what is the possibility in this?
Yeah. I love it.
Right?
I love it.
Yeah. So
that I love it. So you've had a career in HR, and that really does bring us to a good place, because you brought up coaching.
Yeah.
I'd love to finish off our conversation here with connect the dots between what's happening in business and the world today, and the importance of the skills you've learned in HR and coaching to help us navigate this time. What's your view on the relationship between coaching and what's happening right now in the world?
Well, it's interesting you say that, because when I was saying I landed at McCarthy, the other thing that I've done during this period of transition with COVID, because I'd left my previous position, is I engaged with 2 other fellas, and we're just starting up. We'll be launching it pretty soon, this month probably, is an organizational HR consulting company, a 3-person company, which I will be doing in addition to my permanent role. And one of the things we're focusing on is that whole part of helping organizations transform, small to medium-sized businesses transform.
Yeah.
And one of my areas around the learning side, the others are around what we call adopt and engage and transformation and operation. But coaching is a big part of that, because coaching is different, because it's all about possibility. Mm-hmm. And as a skill set, I think it's a critical skill set in leadership. Mm-hmm. And I think that what's happened is we've assumed as people move up that you need to coach less. Mm-hmm. And, the language becomes around strategic thinking and, critical thinking, or being analytic and being a decision maker and being a problem solver. We forget that there's an element of coaching that's always required, right? And coaching is so different than being directive. Mm-hmm. So coaching is all around where you hold the other person being capable.
Right.
So think about it. We got so many senior leaders who build workaround solutions because they don't deal with the issues of the people's actual capability.
Yeah.
Because they don't know how to.
Yeah.
Because they don't know how to coach it.
So the idea, I think what you're touching on is the idea that, business has changed. We need a new type of person for this role. We need to find a way for this person to get a different role so we can make room for a new type of person for this role. That's what you're talking about there? Yeah.
And what happens is sometimes people will make the assumption we need a new person without actually asking the question, well, hang on, because that's what I think is easiest. And because I don't want to have to coach somebody.
Right.
So what we do is, I think what I see businesses do is it's quite often people do these talent assessments, right? You look at people and you figure out what's their potential, but we do it from a very comfortable place. Is what we know, and we do it because we don't want to have to invest any more time with them.
Right.
Right. So, but what we tend to get is we get more of the same, Shaquille, and we leave people behind with tremendous potential.
Yeah.
But we could unlock it if we knew and understood the power of coaching.
Yeah.
You could unlock that, because what coaching does is allows you to see the potential in someone, not just what you know.
Yeah. Well, it allows you to see the potential in the person, but you also have the opportunity to help the other individuals see the potential that's locked within themselves.
Absolutely, because it's all about curiosity.
Yeah.
And I think if you go back to like when I started my career, going back now again to where we started this conversation, I had no idea about being curious.
Right.
I had no idea. I was all about like, I must be this to fit into that job. And I try to define, and I'm defining myself narrowly. Mm-hmm. But coaching is, what are the possibilities? Mm-hmm. Like, what is it you would love to do? What are you really good at? When you're your happiest, what are you doing? So, that if you marry that and you got people like that in your organization, who are, like, wow, the power of your organization is just exponentially grown versus people who are just fundamentally in a box, only seeing themselves a certain way, working for a manager who only sees them in that box. Yeah. It's so limiting. It's limiting.
Yeah. It's so related when you say the coaching is all about seeing the possibility. And it's very much aligned to the possibility available when the world is under disruption, right? So you see the possibility in an individual human being and their potential, but it's the same kind of mindset that goes to seeing the possibility in your business situation.
Oh, you nailed it. Like you talked about the pandemic. I mean, you look at the businesses that did well and that, I think we talked about, for example, curbside pickup, for example, in a retail model.
Yeah.
Right? People, I bet you there are companies talking about that and they've given it to project teams and people say, in about 6 to 9 months, we'll come back with a proposal about it. Yeah. But, we couldn't possibly do it this budget year. It's probably 2 years away. And then something happens called COVID.
Yeah.
And guess what? You got curbside pickup in 2 weeks.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
Like you got it in 2 weeks, right? You got plexi shields up in front of registers. You've got signage up. You've got protocols for people working from an office versus working at home. You've got IT departments who now service at-home employees versus, talking about transitioning to that a few years from now. Overnight, it happens, right? So circumstance forced organizations to transform overnight. And for the large part, most of us think we're not going back.
Yeah.
Right? We're not going back because there's some huge efficiencies and huge possibilities that have been realized through this disruption. Yeah. But I think the organizations that will be most prosperous are those that don't need and don't wait for disruption to happen to them.
Right.
Right? They force their own disruption. Like they ask themselves the questions, what is this? How would we operate? How would we not just survive? How would we thrive under those circumstances?
Yeah. And every one of those things you just said are all questions, right? So that's really it.
Absolutely.
It's the questioning mindset, both about individuals and about the situation we face, and the two are interrelated.
Yeah. And I think the secret sauce becomes then not getting stuck with the question, is then saying, okay, let's treat this like with our skill set about actually getting stuff done.
Right.
Now, how do we do something? If we see a great possibility, how do we do it?
Yeah. Yeah.
How do we go from thinking about it to making it happen?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think if you look at it, we've seen this in the business world where organizations that have come to the forefront, the other organizations are sitting in their boardrooms thinking about it at the same time.
Right.
The other ones leapt into action at that time. They asked the question and action.
Well, you know what? I haven't thought about this before until you just raised it, but what we've seen is the actual doing it seems to be the easy part. The actual doing it is fast. You can do it very quickly. It's the getting to the agreement on what's the right thing to do in this circumstance. That's the make or break moment, right?
Always, isn't it? I mean, isn't that the whole thing about, you're in the boardroom or whatever and you go around it forever, then you have to call another meeting. And I think that's where great leadership comes in. And one thing I learned about leadership as, for lack of a term, hierarchically, the higher up you go, Akil, leaders are more comfortable making hard decisions with less information.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And they'll say, I see the trend, I see the possibility, we're going to commit our business to this.
Yeah.
Now I've got to ask you and all of you with your skill sets, come back with a plan for how.
Yeah.
So we move from that navel gazing, but it's the commitment piece, right? Once you make that commitment, well, now you take all the skills that you have in your organization and you pivot. Okay, guys, we were working on the horse-drawn carriage. We're not working on the horse-drawn carriage anymore. But what are our skill sets? We've got skills at assembly. We've got skills at product design. We've got skills at sales. Okay, let's take all those skills and go this way with them. And you do it.
Yeah. So it sounds like we're backing into a definition of leadership said that the leader has to be or should be the one that can look and see that something is changing, can set a tone for the organization about how that you want to respond, at least what your demeanor is towards the things that are changing, but rely on the talent and the skills and the capabilities of the people around you to bring their best to being able to actually act against that change.
Yeah. And the thing I would add to that is, and if I don't see it, I'm open to others seeing it and influencing. Right. Because I think if I go back to my video experience, the leader didn't see it, but there were others that saw it and were unable to influence the leader. So the leader was not open to that influence. So I think as a leader, it's almost more important for me not to be the one who sees it, but be the one who is open to seeing it, whether it's me or others.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally does. So the idea is always being open and collecting signals and insights and thoughts and asking the right questions, because somebody in your organization might see something way before you do. And being able to recognize the opportunity of that is a real powerful strength in a leader. Wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Yeah. I mean, on one hand, it takes pressure off the leader. But on the other hand, it does put a lot of pressure on the leader because there's a whole new set of skills and vulnerabilities and courage and confidence that you need to kind of be open to that, right?
I would agree. And I think you just said it. The vulnerabilities, I think, is a big part of leadership.
Yeah.
That it's not safe, I think, for leaders to admit they don't know all.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a firm believer, when you fake it, you're trying to fake it to make it. It's not the optimum way to run a business by fake it, right? I think the vulnerability to say, guys, you know what? I don't know what's happening on the shop floor, and so I go down there to find out, or I trust you that do.
Yeah.
That's a big part of it. So this is another part. I mean, it's a whole different conversation. It's trust.
Yeah.
I trust those in my team and those that I have around me to be telling me what I need to hear. It's the emperor's new clothes. I think there's far too many emperor's new clothes scenarios where people in organizations say what they think the leader wants to hear.
Yeah.
But then says the truth outside the room or on the coffee pot or the water.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well,
I think the best organizations is where those conversations happen in the room, in front of the leader, to the leader, because the leader is open and encourages them.
Absolutely. Well, I am an optimist, and I think you're an optimist too. I think we're seeing examples of where the numbers of people practicing old school leadership of fake it till I make it, showing confidence when there's no substance underneath, that is becoming, either it's becoming less and less, or when it does happen, there's a lot of people willing to call it out, right? And name it and say, you know what, that's not really the right way. At least that's my optimistic hope. Yeah, I mean,
I think we all call it nowadays managerial courage.
Right,
it's a term I hear a lot using. Is the courage to put your hand up and say, I'm one person here who maybe has a different perspective.
Yeah,
and but again, I think that's another skill set. how do you use your voice in a way when it needs to be heard instead of being fearful of using it. And that's a skill
true.
too, how to use that voice in a way that is non-threatening, that doesn't put people on the defense. These are the things we're not teaching.
Yeah.
Shaquille, what we should be teaching our upcoming leaders and our leaders is those, how to use that voice. Because there's ways to do it.
Yeah, so let's come back to this point that we put a pin in. I know that we're at the end of our time, but if we can take just one more minute to come back. We talked about some of the things that make it tougher for young people right now entering the workforce. There are some positives, and I think what we just talked about, this awareness of what good leadership now looks like, is a positive of this time for young people to be entering the workforce, when the definition of good leadership is pretty has changed or is changing. What are some other things you would say to young people coming into their careers or coming into leadership positions right now? What would you give them as advice or hope?
Yeah. Well, I think if we're specifically I think careers. I think one is, I think they're already doing it. They're more willing to take risks.
Yeah.
I think the one thing that's always been there is don't always think vertical, lateral, different experiences, to broaden your whole skill set and inform your what you offer to others. And again, I think a career is, think of value that you offer. It's not just a one-way thing. I mean, it's not about what's in it for you.
Yeah.
It's like, what am I going to bring to an organization that is going to make me feel them valued enough to invest in me and give me these opportunities?
Yeah.
Or be open to me. And then on the leadership side, I would say is understand that when you're going into a leadership role, that you have a high level of accountability to those that you are leading.
Right.
Right. That you are going to influence their experience, their job satisfaction on a different level than you did as a peer.
Yeah.
You have the ability now to influence that. So take that very, very seriously. I think be accountable for it.
Yeah.
Be self-aware and work on your gaps.
Yeah.
Don't hide them.
Yeah.
I think that's it. Don't hide the gaps.
Yeah.
Work on the gaps.
Yeah. And also embrace them and see them as part of your journey.
Nobody has it all.
Right.
Nobody has it all. Even, the most successful person you see will always have something that they are working on, or somebody that is helping support them, or they go, you know what, that's not me, but I work with this person and I know that's their skill set. I was smart enough to know that's not me. So they surround themselves with that talent. So
awesome.
Be self-aware. Be self-aware is I think is hugely important.
Well, that is a great place to end this fantastic conversation. Sam, really, really enjoyed it. Particularly this last, 20 minutes of conversation about the future of leadership. Thank you so much for sharing your experience and being so open and vulnerable yourself with your learnings in life. I wish you all the very best.
And the same to you, Shaquille. And thank you for the opportunity. And I love your content on the platforms, and look forward to hearing these podcasts. And I look forward to seeing and hearing more.
Thank you so much, Sam. Take care, and we'll stay in touch.
You bet. Thanks for the opportunity.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
To both leaders in businesses, but also for you as an individual in your career going through disruptions. How you look at your core competencies defines how you will navigate the change. It was great catching up with Sam. Here are some takeaways. First of all, be open. Be willing to share what you're going through, what you're looking to do, what you're uncertain about, but always do it positively. That's how he stumbled into his first job. He learned from his dad. Show up ready to work and earn your money. We talked about disruption and its experience at Roger's video, and one of the key takeaways from that was that the way you look at your core competencies defines how you will navigate change. I think that applies. He also talked about how the leaders of tomorrow need to be vulnerable and recognize that at times they need their team to help point them in the right direction. I hope you enjoyed that conversation. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate, review, or share it. I want to say thank you to one of my favorite bands, Late Night Conversations, for sharing their song Chaos with me and letting me use it in this episode. You can learn more about them on Instagram at LNCConnected. And here's more of their song Chaos to take you out.
Far behind my eyes, mediation, suffocation, it'll break me. Information in disguise. But when your eyes finally found mine, you were there, but I'm defined by the chaos in my mind. I believe what I perceive is a weave tearing at the seams, and I wonder what's behind. And my ears are bleeding, and the reasoning's in the logic of the season, taking the pleasing from my soul and leaving me to die. And I feel the lacing, LNC like racing on stationary animation, taking me